started that recording. And then my name's Amy Birch. I'm a traffic engineer and working with NDOT. I'm a consultant and work with NDOT to administer the traffic calming program. And also on the call, we have Ellie Finn as a consultant working on this program and project. There she is.
Hi
So,
guys.
so thanks for joining. We're here to talk about the Sharondale Drive traffic calming project. And first off, we're going to start with some background information about the program and then talk about the tools in our toolbox and specifically then we'll talk about Sharondale Drive and some concepts we have for that. So what is traffic calming? Oh, I had one other announcement to start out with. Councilmember Pulley let us know that he was going to be at the special called meeting this evening regarding the Titan Stadium vote, so he was unable to make it to this meeting. But like I said, these meetings are recorded, so he'll have access to what's discussed, and we've shared the slides in advance with him as well. So he's aware of the project. Okay, so what is traffic calming? Traffic calming is in this program, the way NDOT addresses it is strictly for residential streets. So we're not talking about these type of measures on streets like Hillsborough Road or anything like that, but they're specific for residential streets and includes physical solutions that encourage lower speeds over the length of the street, essentially. So our target is speed reduction. And when we talk about traffic calming, we often talk about the 3 E's of traffic calming, which include education, so educating our motoring public about safety and reasons why we want to drive slower on residential streets. Also enforcement, that's kind of the job that MNPD does here, but this program specifically targets engineering, and so that's the street and how do we modify the street or address the street such that it encourages lower speeds that are safer for all. So really at the crux of this is safety and vision zero. This diagram here presents the correlation between vehicle speed and a pedestrian's survivability rate or chance of survivability. So on the left, you have if a pedestrian is struck by a vehicle going 25 miles per hour, they have an 89% chance of survival. And then as that speed increases, that chance of survival dramatically decreases. And so this one shows at 45 miles per hour, pedestrian's chance of survival is only 35%. So that kind of guides us in this program as we try to target and achieve slower speeds on residential streets where we may see more pedestrians in the street or adjacent to the street. This is a very popular program, and it's been funded pretty well through council over the last few years. But as of our most recent application evaluation, which happened in February, we had over 400 streets, neighborhood streets that had requested traffic calming. So that's quite a lot of streets in Nashville. The picture on the right is our GIS mapping tool that shows which streets have requested traffic calming. So those are the pink streets you see. In this recent selection for traffic calming projects, 26 neighborhood streets have been selected, and Sharondale was one of those streets. So congratulations on being selected. We look forward to working with you all, and this is kind of the beginning. But how did we get from over 400 streets to 26 streets in this selection? We have a data-driven prioritization methodology that's utilized in the program, and we look at 5 main criteria. and data points to make that selection. It's basically a 100-point scoring scale, and the points are allocated based on this pie chart here to the right. So the data that we look at and gets the most points is speed, and we go out and measure the speed on the streets that have requested traffic calming. And compare that speed that we measure to a 25-mile-per-hour kind of target speed in this program. So we measure all those 400 streets, and then we have that data. So also we're measuring volume, and that's the total daily volume on the street. Then we're also looking at other criteria like trip destinations. So are there schools, parks, libraries near the street or on that street that we would expect pedestrians to be walking to and from those types of destinations. We're also looking at non-driver accommodations. So for instance, are there no sidewalks on the street? That get some scoring points there. Or is there a presence of bikeways on the street or nearby transit? So that kind of falls under the non-driver accommodations criteria. And then we also, under the vulnerable user injury and fatality, that is a look back at 10 years of data and whether there have been pedestrian injuries or fatalities on that street. So we look at street by street basis. So every street that has requested traffic calming goes through this prioritization and gets a score. So at the end of that evaluation, the streets that rank at the top of the list with the highest scores are the ones that are selected. So that's how Sharondale Drive was selected, and that's why we're here talking with you about traffic calming on Sharondale. So this is the street and some data about this your street on Sharondale, but this is the limits of the project, and it's between Woodlawn Drive and Hillsborough Drive. That was the segment that was requested in the application for traffic calming. So that's what we're looking at. So just a few points about Sharondale. It is categorized as a collector avenue, which is kind of a higher tier than just a residential local street, but it still is eligible for traffic calming based on the volume and the speed. So the speed was measured at 35 miles per hour. That's the 85th percentile speed that we're talking about. So that means that's the speed that 85% of the traffic that we measured was going 35 miles per hour or below, but 15% of traffic was measured at going above 35 miles per hour. The volume was right around 4,000 vehicles a day. That's the volume in both directions on Sharondale. And then, just the characteristics of the street, it's a fairly narrow street, about 20 feet wide with center line striping. There's not any sidewalks on Sharondale Drive on at least this section that we're talking about. So here's just a map view of the limits of the street that we're talking about between Woodlawn and Hillsborough Pike. So now let's talk about the tools in our toolkit and what we use through this program to encourage slower speeds on residential streets. So our first and most used tool are speed cushions on through this program, and that's because they're highly effective. People really like them, and they're easy to implement as well. These are modular rubber devices that are drilled into the pavement, and we form them in various configurations based on the street widths and characteristics. So, a wider street, we can put more devices in there, but to fit the width of the roadway, but they are designed such that they have a reduced impact to emergency vehicle response, because those emergency vehicles have a slightly wider wheelbase than a typical passenger vehicle. And so they are able to kind of straddle them and have less impact as they navigate the street. So that's one benefit of these. And these are, you're probably very familiar with this. This is what's installed on Lombardi, just across Hillsborough from Sharondale. So I feel certain you all are familiar with what we're talking about here, but they have the pavement markings on them so that they are visible at night. They're paired with warning signage, so that drivers are aware of what they're approaching, and they'll have a warning, advisory speed plaque with them. That's like on the picture on the top left there. And then this picture on the bottom left is showing a profile view of what they look like, because they're 3 inches high at their tallest point. This one is a device that's 10.5 feet long. So you can see how they're in this modular form. So we can make them shorter or longer. 10.5 feet is what we use most often now. And then there are some circumstances where we may have bike lanes adjacent to or on the street that we're trying to protect. So sometimes we'll use these flexible delineators to keep drivers from trying to go around them. So a multitude of ways that we can implement these just based on different characteristics of the street. But they're very effective. Another similar or the same material actually, but similar treatment are speed tables. These, instead of having the gaps that better accommodate the emergency vehicles, these are fully across the pavement from edge to edge, and they're designed to be longer and flat on top. Still effective, but a little bit, they can be driven a little bit faster than some of the speed cushion configurations. So how useful or how effective are these? NDOT has been doing some post-installation data collection on devices and specifically the speed cushions, and have found that, like I said, they're very effective. Our average of the locations where we've been doing these measurements and collecting the data has shown that the average speed on a street has reduced from 31 miles per hour to 22 miles per hour. And the 85th percentile speed has reduced from 37 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour in locations or streets where these have been installed. So NDOT's continuing to do these post-installation studies to confirm and understand exactly how effective these are. But right now we're seeing that they're really effective. We also are using radar feedback signs on streets, and these are simply the speed limits posted, and then a radar sign below that flashes your speed as you approach the sign to give drivers that awareness of how fast they're going. And again, these have been showing that they're very effective. The average reduction has been about 6 miles per hour for the average speeds, and 7 miles per hour for the 85th percentile speeds on these. And that's been over a period of time since they've been installed. Another tool we use that's less intrusive is pavement narrowing through use of marking. Sometimes we have streets that are wider than your standard travel lane needs to be, and so we will maybe stripe the edge line, that white edge line, to narrow the travelway. Traffic circles are a tool that's used at intersections, and they're similar to roundabouts in that drivers are meant to drive counterclockwise around the central island that's installed in the middle of the intersection. These are, we really have to have just the right intersection to fit these in. The narrow kind of street on Sharondale is probably not conducive to this type of measure because through the program we're not widening intersections to put the circle in. This would just be at pretty wide intersections where these would be applicable, but they're installed. These are actually rubber curbs shown in this picture that would formed into a circle. But the horizontal deflection slows drivers as they travel through the intersection. So they can be effective in the right locations. Bulb outs and chicanes are kind of another tool that we use to introduce some horizontal deflection or narrow the street at an intersection. So the picture on the left is showing kind of a wide street that some of that extra pavement or parking lane has been striped out to narrow the intersection. And we will often use these flexible delineators to kind of physically make that change and narrowing. And then on the right is the chicane, if you're familiar with Fairfax Avenue in Hillsborough. I believe these are pictures of there where NDOT has kind of created some lane shifting in the street, some horizontal deflection by alternating on-street parking from side to side along the length of the street. So that kind of takes a straight street where drivers may be able to drive faster and slow down because they have to navigate through this kind of lane shifting. So those are the tools in our toolbox. Outside of this neighborhood street traffic calming program, hopefully you're familiar with the Hub. If not, the Hub is a great resource that Metro has, and it's not just accessing NDOT for NDOT issues, but water services and all of the departments really, but it's a great way to report issues like a sign's been knocked down, a traffic light's out and not working or things like that, or also requests for new signs and things like that. So that's calling 311, or there's an app where you can access it through NDOT, not NDOT, but Metro's website. For all things walking and biking, sidewalk related, Anna Dearman is the walk and biking manager at NDOT, and this is her contact information. And then beautification is things like neighborhood cleanups and adopt a streets. JD Lane is the coordinator with NDOT for beautification. So we will go into, first, are there any questions that we need to in the chat? I don't see any in the chat. So if you have any, feel free to unmute and talk.
I have a question. My name is Rebecca, and I live on Sharondale, kind of closer to the Woodlawn end at that blinking light there. On the speed cushions, I guess that's exactly what the picture you're going to show me is how many per, I was going to ask how many per length, so I'll just go on to the next question. What is, when you do narrowing, what is the absolute minimum width you could narrow a street to?
We pretty much try to get 10-foot lanes, so 20 feet is what we would typically do. We might go down a little bit less, but 10-foot lanes is really our target.
Okay. And then does this include the intersection at all of Woodlawn Drive and Sharondale?
Not specifically, because it is an always stop already. So we're, and that's sort of everyone's stopping there. So we're not expecting speeding. We're really targeting the speeding on the length of the street.
Okay, and then does does resurfacing the road, is that included at all in
Not in this
if you're going to put speed
program.
cushions on a road that's kind of falling apart, I was just
Great
curious
question.
how that works.
We do coordinate with the paving program. So if there's a plan to resurface Sharondale as we're preparing to either install the devices, then we would coordinate that effort.
Okay, and then does the calming involved, does Sharondale qualify for an overall speed reduction from 35 miles an hour?
So that would be something you could reach out to the hub about, that speed reductions, like speed limit reductions are part of, they require a traffic and parking commission approval. But we could coordinate that back if that's something that the group is interested in.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's highly walked. I mean, it shouldn't be, but we all live there, so we walk to get around to the neighborhoods in the back and to get back up to golf clubs. So it is a highly walked road. So it's something to think about. Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
I actually have a question too. I'm sorry.
Sure, go for it.
This is Mary Beth Ward. I'm on Sharondale Court. When regards to like what Rebecca was talking about with the pedestrian traffic, I'm assuming anything that has to do with building of sidewalks is separate from this. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we jump into this preliminary concept? Okay, seeing none on the chat. So this is a initial look on our part to give some thoughts about what we think is a good solution for traffic calming on Sharondale Drive based on site visit, the data that we have collected, and just looking at the street. So what I'm showing here are, this is just high level and open for discussion and feedback from you all, but based on the length of the street and the width of the street, we're looking at doing speed cushions. That's what we would recommend, speed cushions on Sharondale, and it's basically 4 sets. Because of the width of Sharondale already, these would be basically like the picture shown here on the right. They would be 1 in each lane. And they're spaced roughly 500 feet apart, and that's kind of in that range of what we typically install so that we kind of get a consistent vehicle speed along the length of the street. So that's about what that spacing is, including the spacing between the traffic control device, like the always stop, or the signal over at Hillsborough Pike. So these would be paired with the warnings, speed cushion signs that you see in the picture also. And they would be the 10.5 foot length, most likely, or 14 feet. We would not do them as small or as short as the ones on Lombardi. I think those are 7 foot. So these would be a little longer, which is a little bit of a smoother, more comfortable ride, but are still very effective in slowing speeds. So here we're showing one set between Woodlawn Drive and 23rd Avenue, and then a set but closer to 22nd Avenue and White Oak. and then another one close, kind of close to the entrance to the school and the church. So what we do here is this is kind of a opportunity for us to show you our initial thoughts and get some feedback, and then and then what we will do after that is create a more refined design plan that kind of zooms in more, has more specifics about distance from driveways and things like that, so that you have a better idea of where they're going. But that's really dictated by the engineering and driveway spacing and all of that. But you would have a little bit better idea. But this is really to show you kind of the spacing we would recommend, and to get your feedback on whether these tools are what you're looking for Sharondale.
Amy, I cannot speak for my neighbors, obviously. I can just only speak for kind of my personal opinion. I would really like to see Sharondale. I don't mind the cushions at all. They don't bother me. I would really like to see Sharondale resurfaced and really as narrow a lanes as we could get. I think that would be equally effective of slowing folks down and have clear markings. You've got some of the street that's crumbling off into yards and makes it difficult to walk, let alone bike. And I would love to see some very clear lines in addition to any cushions. But again, I can't speak for the neighbors. I just can speak for what I know and what I see, in front of my house. So
I'm going to speak up. My name is Peter Dote. I live in Sharondale Court, and I agree with Rebecca Moore on narrowing the road down and I think we should be creating walk space in that narrow space, because it's dangerous to walk along Sharondale, and we've got older neighbors that have to walk to the school bus. To the bus stop on Hillsborough Pike, and these are older people that it's just totally unsafe, and there's just nowhere for them to walk, especially when they're down towards Hillsborough. The road rises high, there's a creek on one side and a steep slope on the other that goes into people's yards. So there's just no place for these folks to walk to get to the bus stop. So I think I agree with Rebecca on narrowing the road, but to create space so people can walk and run and get to the bus stop. It's extremely dangerous.
Okay,
This is Mary Beth again. I was going to chime in with Peter, because there actually is somebody that lives on Sharondale Drive that is blind and has to walk almost in the middle of the road with a vest and her cane to get to the bus stop. As Peter mentioned, there's a creek that runs alongside of Sharondale Drive, and especially where it gets up to Hillsborough Road, it is crumbling. The road is crumbling into the creek. So one of the things to think about is, this is great. I'm all about trying to figure out a way to slow people down, because, okay, say we can't do sidewalks, but at least we can maybe slow people down so that we can potentially decrease the likelihood of somebody getting hit. But also, if we're going to put speed bumps on a crumbling road that's deteriorating, then that speed bump in about a year is just going to fall apart.
Okay, thanks for that feedback.
And people try to drive around them too. So you're going to have more deterioration on the side of the road because vehicles avoid those speed bumps, at least on one side, and they may go out on the edge of the roadway.
Yeah, we have seen some of that in other deployments of these devices. We do try to, like this picture shows, put our warning sign really at or right close to the device to deter people from trying to, get off road to avoid them. And just from experience, and you all probably know this if you drive around the streets that have them already, but the best way to navigate these speed cushions is straight over them instead of trying to do the one wheel on, one wheel off. That's a much rougher ride than driving straight over them. Not to say that you can just fly over them if you go straight over them, but if these are installed, they'll be on your street, and you'll be traveling over them quite a bit. And that's just our experience from comfortability. They're still very effective in slowing you down, though. Okay, so I'm hearing, if at all possible, to narrow through pavement striping to create walk space. And I'll say walk space is not really what our program does exactly, but I understand what's being asked as far as using the paint in your favor for ability for at least a little bit of space for walking, and understanding that currently the pavement seems to be in not ideal condition, is crumbling in places, particularly near the creek. So want to kind of check on that as far as coordinating with the paving group on if that's on the future list for any work to be done on that street.
Amy, to the
mhm.
point on the crumbling, it's not just the crumbling on the edges. You've got some pretty poorly done patchwork for potholes as well that just keep reopening and reopening. And so again, to Mary Beth's and Peter's point, you're gonna putting a speed cushion on top of an already crumbling infrastructure is just, I don't know that alone is going to help us. I'm particularly, I appreciate the walking space. That's just kind of a bonus. But to me, I'm more interested in speed reduction because I've had my mailbox knocked down more times than I can count. And so I feel like if we had clear stripage and lineage, that might set the tone, I guess, for the street. I guess I'm not
Yeah.
being very articulate, but
No, you are. And I noticed out there, a lot of the striping maybe used to be there and it's faded and gone too. So we can coordinate with paving and striping as far as that goes. But yeah, I know, but we'll have to look very closely at, depending on status of resurfacing the street. We'll have to look very closely at the location of these devices to make sure that we're avoiding any issues with the pavement, if that were the case. So I appreciate that feedback because it gives us something to look into as we move further into design. See some comments in the chat. I'm just going to read through those real quick. A lot of concurring, I think, with the discussion that we're having already.
Hey, Amy, sorry, I apologize.
Mhm.
I don't want to interrupt, and I'm not
No.
trying to belabor the point that both Peter and Mary Beth and Rebecca have made, but I just, you hit on it earlier. Sorry, my name is Jason. Brittany and I live across the street from Peter and Mary Beth on Sharondale Court. And not to put too fine a point on it, but when you talk about the increase in vehicle traffic, along with the increase of foot traffic on Sharondale Court, I think adding the speed bumps is a good first step. But like Rebecca and others mentioned, I mean, I've seen it in other cities where these speed bumps go into already crumbling roadways, and they end up sliding around and sliding off, and they end up creating more of a road hazard than they're meant to benefit. So I think, like everybody mentioned earlier, if we do that, I mean, putting the, you know, speed bumps up before a paving project, I think is counterproductive to what we're trying to accomplish here.
Mhm.
And the last thing I'll say is that I feel like Sharondale is kind of a ticking time bomb when it comes to, you know, somebody's going to get hit. I mean, Rebecca already mentioned her mailbox getting knocked over, you know, more times than she can count. It's going to be a person eventually, and it's, you know, might be me, might be Brittany, I don't know, but I mean, the expectation, you know, for us to play Frogger, you know, as we're walking down the street, I don't think is very viable. So, and I know there's other forms that we should be voicing this other than this current environment, but I just, you know, wanted to kind of iterate or reiterate what everybody else had been saying.
Sure. I appreciate that. Thank you. We've got that in our notes.
Yeah, and Amy, this is Mary Beth.
Sarah
I'm just
Allen
gonna
on,
shut up. But one of the things too that's kind of unique about Sharondale is we are really the only cut through to get to Hillsborough Road that has a light other than Woodmont going into Green Hills. And it does have a bus stop both on this side of Sharondale, on this side of Hillsborough Road, and the other side of Hillsborough Road. So it is very conducive to pedestrian traffic, and you know, of course, with the bus and everything, and just it's just one of those few cut throughs that people have to be able to take a left on Hillsborough Road without taking their life in their hands. So it is highly used, but anything that you can do to help slow people down and help us be able to walk, and like as Jason said, not play Frogger, because there's been many a times where I have had to jump off the side of the road and in somebody's yard because there's just no room. So, and now I'll be quiet.
Well, like I said, we're seeing a lot of effectiveness with these tools, these speed cushions installed all across various types of streets all across the city. So, you know, I do think if these are installed, and you know, we can talk about the before after resurfacing, but we believe they'll be very effective in reducing speeds on the street, which just in general makes it safer as a pedestrian. I know we can't build sidewalks. We wish we could build sidewalks in this program and every program all over the city, but I think our goal with this program is to slow the vehicle speeds to make that safer in the conditions that we have now. And that's, you know, part of why Sharondale was selected, is that scoring process that we talked about earlier. And, you know, there is a lack of sidewalks. There are bus stops near the street. There is, you know, a level of speeding and volume on this street. So that's why this was selected, and we're hoping to target some of those things and slow drivers down through this. So I'm not hearing any like major opposition to the speed cushions. It sounds like we're you know, liking the cushion idea. We'll look into some narrowing with pavement markings. We will coordinate with the paving group as far as when or what the status is for resurfacing Sharondale. So we'll try to have that information at our next meeting. But it sounds like maybe we should move forward with more of a concrete or refined design for Sharondale with this concept, and move towards the next steps. So.
When do you think this will start? When it'll happen?
That's a great question. And so I'm going to talk a bit about our flow chart here for the program. So this whole thing started because someone submitted an application to request traffic calming on Sharondale. And just in case you're not familiar, the program has 2 windows that applications can be submitted twice a year. So at some point, this application was submitted for Sharondale. We went through this prioritization and selection process. It was selected like we talked about earlier. Now we're in that meeting 1 phase of the program, and where we talk about the overview of the program, present our initial concept, sort of request feedback and refinement so that we can go through and design the project and get more details as far as, more exact location of the devices and the signage that's going to go with it and all of that. Then once we do our work as far as preparing the design plans, NDOT will reach back out to set up a second meeting where we will present that more detailed plan to the community. And then we'll also talk about the next steps. But those are really the online balloting process that this program uses, and then moves towards construction. So to go over a bit about the online ballot, it's a process where we send postcard mailers similar to those that you got for this meeting announcement, but those will have a QR code and link to vote in favor or against the plan. And the plans will be posted online, and it's a 6-week window. And so the project will move forward if 66% of the votes that are received are in favor of the project. And those votes are sent to, or those voting cards are sent to all the property owners along the affected street. And then, so if that, the ballot is favorable, the project moves forward to construction, then NDOT will order the materials and get them scheduled for installation. So that process is about the post-ballot process to installation is about 6 months.
Okay. I don't recall getting a mailer
Okay.
at this meeting. I live on Sharondale Court. Is it possible I didn't get it because I live on Sharondale Court?
It is possible. It is possible that you might not have gotten it because you're on Sharondale Court. It's the properties that have frontage on Sharondale, or the properties that do the voting, that have the opportunity to vote. So that might have been why you didn't get the card, if you don't have a property frontage on Sharondale. Now, some properties have like common ownership properties, and those may have gotten the cards. So if the
Our
common
only
owners,
way in and out is Sharondale Court. I mean, is Sharondale, so it's not like we don't have a choice to drive on it, so maybe it could be expanded.
well, we really have a pretty strict policy on how that works, and it's the properties with frontage on the street. But that does not preclude you from being in favor of the project, talking to your neighbors that are voting, and being involved in the input of what the concept and the design ultimately is.
Can you clarify the 66%? Is that of who respond, or is that 66% of, because we have a lot of rentals
It
on
is,
Sharondale?
right. It's 66% of the respondents need to be in favor of it.
Okay.
So it's not 66% of all the properties on the street, and that's precisely because there's unique situations on all different types of streets in Nashville, but we do recognize there's rentals on lots of streets, and so those property owners may not be inclined to vote or hard to reach if they're, particularly if they're not local. So yes, it's 66% of the respondents need to be in favor for the project to move forward. And the balloting period is 6 weeks. So, you know, there's a start and an end to it. So that the results of the vote are posted on NDOT's website as well. And that's communicated back to your council member and our neighborhood contact that NDOT's working with to communicate about this project. So, yep, that's how that's done. And I didn't mention this, but they do have a unique ID on those ballot cards so that we can, you know, just make sure that there's not duplicate votes and things like that. But this is contact information. Gil Thomas is the program manager with NDOT, and he's really integral in a lot of the communication that goes in and out for this program with council members and residents that are our contacts, but also he tracks and keeps up with all of the results of the ballot votes. So he would be communicating that information when we get to that. And we'll talk more about the ballot, of course, when we get to the second meeting that we'll hold. But Gil's also involved in the implementation and getting these projects to construction. So he's a really great resource. That's his contact information and my contact information if you have any questions. And I also want to direct you to the Traffic Calming website. This QR code or website address down here is full of lots of great information about the program, status of the neighborhoods and neighborhood streets that we're working on currently, the tracker showing where traffic calming has been requested. So if you live on a different street and are interested in traffic calming, you can go and look and see if it's already been requested or not, or if you want to apply for traffic calming in the future. That's a good resource. Any questions? I'm not trying to rush out or anything.
Yeah, sorry, Amy. This is Jason. Just one final clarification point. So going back to Peter's last question. So looking at that timeline that you had up on the screen a few slides ago. So if we were to, kind of walk it front to back, are we talking about, it kind of sounds like this is at least a 12, 18, 24 month timeline. Is that accurate?
12 is really our target. It could go into 18, but not, I don't foresee it going any longer than that. And we're constantly, the program had some backlog that we're trying to churn through. As we've refined the program, we've been able to get projects to construction faster, but there is still some delay in just getting the project installed. But I think 12 months is our target from, initial starting to coordinate with the neighborhood to set the meetings and then move them along.
Understood. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Amy, this is Tara Allen. I'm on Sharondale Drive, and obviously all of us probably that are here are really concerned with the possibility of getting or probability of getting sidewalks on Sharondale. So would Anna Dearman be the best person to
Yes.
contact next for all of us? And should we arrange a meeting with her?
Yes, I would recommend you email her. Did you grab her email? I
did. The
Sure.
Anna.Dearman@Nashville.gov.
That's correct. And she would be able to reference the walk and bike plan and whether or not Sharondale's been identified for sidewalk in the plan and give you better information about that. So Anna's a resource for you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Sidewalks. Mm-hmm.
Amy, Greg DePriest. Just a point of clarification. What's the current speed limit on Sharondale Drive?
It's 35.
35. I queried someone when I initially received notice of this meeting and via email, and asked some questions and got responses, and I was told it was 30, but the signs that are up do say 35.
That's
So
correct.
it is 35.
It's
So
it's 35.
one of the goals in this would be to reduce, if you reduce the average speed by 6 or 7 miles per hour and you start at 35 to get it down to slightly below 30. And do you find that over time that if you have a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit or a 25, that you get it 6 or 7 miles below those? Is it a standard or is it proportional?
Mm. Yeah. It's an average of where we have collected the data. Was those charts that we were showing was an average of 6 streets where we have collected the data. And so I believe it's would be proportional since it's an
Yeah.
average.
Yeah. Are there any tools in your toolkit that you'd like to deploy but aren't permitted to because they're not accepted? Like narrowing to 9 feet, 18 feet overall road width instead of 20? I think it's hard on Sharondale because there's dump trucks go up and down Sharondale. Heavy equipment moves on large trailers. They're challenged as it is, but I'm operating under the assumption that as you reduce the width, you reduce the speed.
Right. That's typically, to some degree, it's not as great of a reduction as, a physical measure installed on the street. So you may achieve some reduced speed with narrowing. So your question was, are there tools in the toolkit that we would like to use but cannot use because they're not
Approved?
approved? So the tools in our toolkit are approved as far as, we can use them where they're appropriate, So like a traffic circle would not be appropriate, I don't believe, at any of the intersections along this street because we don't have the width to install that device. But on streets where it is appropriate, we could use those. So I don't know that there are any tools that we'd like to use instead of, or that are not necessarily approved, if that makes sense.
Well, I guess, yeah, this is recorded, so of course we all have to watch our words and what we say. But I wonder, are there things other cities are doing since you're a civil engineer and you're a
Gotcha.
professional engineer?
Mm-hmm.
Are there things other cities are doing that have gotten your attention?
Maybe, but we've found that these speed cushions are really effective. Now, not everyone likes them, and that may be because they're so effective. But no, nothing. I guess no. We use these speed cushions in a lot of places, and just find them to be very effective.
Let me circle back. Why is the speed limit 35?
This street is categorized as a collector street, collector avenue, which means it's kind of collecting streets from the residential local streets and connecting them to the larger street, which is Hillsborough Pike. So that probably has something to do with it. It can be revisited if that's something that is of interest. Typically, the channels are that request would go through traffic and parking, but I'll communicate back to NDOT staff about the speed limit on the street.
What are the other classifications of streets? Because I would consider Sharondale to be a cut through to Woodmont and not necessarily just a collector, but it's a it's a pathway to get to other sections of town so it's like a connector to me.
Mm-hmm. And right, that's what it is. But so you have your local residential streets are the lowest street level or street classification, and then our collector avenues are kind of your mid-level streets. So those are connecting your residential streets to the arterial streets, which is Hillsborough Pike. And so those are called arterial boulevards. And then above that, you have like freeways and parkways and things like that. But the street network is primarily your local streets, collector avenues, which are the midway between the local street and the arterial, the larger street.
Okay.
So it's, it's carrying cut through traffic, yes, probably. But that's because that traffic is kind of originating in the neighborhoods, and it's connecting that traffic to Hillsborough or over to Woodlawn. So it's critical piece of the network, essentially.
Hi, this is Rebecca Nofi. I was just wondering, a clarification question. So are the speed limit reduction, is that something that's considered as part of this project, or would that be something we would have to approach separately?
I think it would be something you would approach separately, but I'm going to communicate this back to NDOT and the traffic calming program manager, Gil, regarding the posted speed limit on Sharondale. But it's something that could easily, or the neighborhood or just one person can make a request through the hub Nashville and make that request for a lower speed. And what will happen is the traffic engineers will review it, take a look at it, and give you a response on whether or not they agree with that request. And if so, it would go through the Traffic and Parking Commission that way. So if you make a request, to summarize, if you make a request through Hub, you'll get a response in some fashion about what the staff recommends for the speed.
Great, thank you. I think that's definitely something we should look into. I have little kids and I'm walking down the street all the time, and it's downright terrifying to just go, to one of the other side streets to go for a little walk. And so many times you have to just run out to the side because the cars will just not slow down. And so anything we can do to get people to calm down and be more respectful to any pedestrians, I think is valued.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other questions? Okay.
Amy, I just wanted to just thank you for your time. I don't have any more questions, but I just look forward to what y'all come up with, and thank you for the education and the input tonight.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for all your input. I think it was really helpful for us to hear about the desires of the neighborhood and get that sort of confirmation that speed cushions are something you might like to see on your streets, and we'll work to put together a more detailed plan. We'll evaluate the specific width of the street and the striping, and we'll also coordinate with other department or other divisions within NDOT, specifically about paving, and find out more information about that process and schedule. So I don't know if it's slated for resurfacing right away or what, but we'll try to have that information when we meet again soon. So, all right. Well, if there's nothing else, I thank you all for attending, and this meeting again will be posted on NDOT's website, Metro's YouTube channel. And so if you have neighbors that weren't able to attend and are interested in learning about it, please direct them to that website. And we'll
Thank you very much.
see you again soon for
Thanks,
our next
Amy.
meeting. Thank you.